What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the game on Pax8 Live, the show where we discuss all the cybersecurity shenanigans you need to be aware of for the last week. As always, I'll be joined by Matt Lee, and later on, we're going to have Tom Welton, our Manager of Solution Engineering in EMEA, joining us to talk about some cybersecurity in EMEA. Before we get started, I do want to share this show is pre-recorded. We're actually recording this all the way back on the 3rd, because by the time you watch this on the 11th, Matt will be actively getting his beard shaved at ConnectWise IT Nation. With that in mind, as of the 3rd, they're up to $120,000 or 120% of the goal. We're pushing it as high as we can. And today or the next couple of days are probably, as you're watching this, probably your last chance to donate, as they're likely to close that out after IT Nation concludes. So get your donation in. Let's maximize our impact here. They are adding more charities, so I think that the total story here is going to be fantastic. And with that, let's jump into the news.
All right, I'm going to start us out. We constantly, Dom and I, talk about CISA and DHS starting to understand some of the cybersecurity gaps and understanding some of the cybersecurity kind of poverty line, if you will. And so I have an article that starts us out with CISA saying that they are expanding funds to an existing program called Project Reach. And it says Project Reach provides high school students with improved access to cybersecurity education, resources to help them improve their cybersecurity skills, and opportunities that will help connect the dots to pursue cybersecurity careers. So they're calling out this 760,000 missing jobs in cybersecurity just today, and how they're trying to adjust it. Dom, what are your thoughts on kind of this effort and what the likelihood of this succeeding is?
It's twofold for me. I think one, everybody, all students, right? Everyone who's about to be a grown citizen in our country needs a base layer of cybersecurity education, just from the perspective of protecting yourself and understanding what it means to be a digital citizen. I think that's key. But expanding on this program, which is obviously focused at creating talent, the shortage is insane, right? And it's created highly inflated salaries that are going to have a real hard time existing through any sort of recession or real, severe recession. So we're in a pickle, right? If this doesn't get fixed, we will find ourselves no talent or not enough talent to defend the most important infrastructure on the planet, right? So I think it's huge. The success of it, I can't speak to it. It could be hard to get kids interested in a field, especially when you're honest with them and tell them in this field you get punched in the face all the time for a living, right? But I think it is a good field, and it's really all about how you present it to folks and the opportunity there. It's one of those rare industries that will never ever go anywhere. So I think it's huge. I'm excited to see what comes of it. But I am a little bit skeptical of just our ability to get talent and kids interested in this field.
I think if you take it from this understanding of linguistic immersion to some extent, like bringing kids into this understanding that, wait, there's risk in Facebook? What do you mean? Right.
Exactly.
You kind of get into that challenge. And so I do think there's a gap of, once we start educating the basic tasks and understandings, we can start seeing that grow into long-term growth of capabilities, or even sparking an interest, right? You have a kid that's exposed to this and says, oh my God, I want to be in cybersecurity. I like punches in the face. And then they wind up with eyes that look like this, right? But ultimately, yeah, it's definitely a good thing. I think that we're seeing this public-private partnership and kind of awareness of education has to be some of the space that starts. And I did a presentation to 8th graders.
Public education, right? K-12 education is the key to this program. Because in college, you have to opt for it. If you can get it in front of a kid in 9th grade and make them take courses, they might come out very interested in it and also have a huge leg up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I did a talk one time with 8th graders called "When Grandma Ain't Grandma." Right. And it was describing how I would attack them through Facebook and then asking them to pick apart the kill chain. And so kind of reminds me of that. Also, if you're familiar with my charity of shaving my beard, we have one called Bits and Bytes, and they educate 8th graders. And she's made some really cool online education for 8th graders around disinformation campaigns, social media risks, exposure of data risks, things like that, to try to make it a fun way for kids to start learning some of that. So it's really neat. Let's kick over real quick. I will kick us over to the next article here with the magic of clicking a button. All right. So one of the things you talked about, Dom, was like protecting our infrastructure, protecting the world from these cyber attacks. And so I'm quite convinced with this article that threat actors hate science, or they just find random IPs and ransom them. But they ransomed, from what we can read in the article, the ALMA, or Atacama Large Millimeter Array Observatory in Chile, because they were down. They had limited access to email services, and it's probably fairly understanding that it was probably a ransomware attack, from what I can tell. What do you think about that, Dom? Have we seen other attacks on infrastructure? What are your thoughts as this continues to develop, as we see more of these?
I don't think they hate science, but I think they love money. And a target like an ALMA observatory, right, which is obviously a fairly critical spot in the world, can command a lot of
Yeah,
money if they successfully pull off the attack. So I think you have your script kiddie ransomware attackers who are just, they're hitting whatever they can hit, right? Those are the ones that hit our parents when we get the annoying phone call for computer support because they clicked a link, right? But this is
right.
probably almost certainly a targeted attack. And I think we see these targeted attacks where the economic benefit is worth the risk of exposing oneself. So yeah, we see a lot of attacks on critical infrastructure, right? And I think what needs to come out of this is, was it an act of a nation state, or was it just an act of a financially motivated attacker? Because a lot of times in CI, it's a nation state, and they're poking and they're testing to see what they can do. And if you've ever seen the movie Snowden, he goes through this whole fictitious scenario of turning off the power in Russia or whatever, right? And there's
Yeah, yeah.
also that played to why you would infiltrate critical infrastructure, but those actors don't ransomware. So I would guess that this is a
Right.
financially motivated attack.
This is financially motivated in my gut too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great call out. I think what's great. I don't want to be gone on record saying what's great about this, but what's great about this, as I constantly contradict myself here, what's great about this is the more we see these kind of awareness level government entities being poked, things existing in the public, the more it's doing for normalizing the nomenclature, normalizing the conversation that this is a real endemic risk. It's part of business. So is fire. So is my dump truck breaking down. So is my right. And so
Right.
we have to have that be part of the normalized language and culture. But I think these critical infrastructure attacks do a good job of helping motivate both sides of that, public and private. So, last
Or we
article.
see HR 5440, right? Like CI attacks are
Yeah,
bad. The damage could
yeah,
be
yeah.
life threatening. So the government
I'd
responds,
rather call
right?
it Circia, Dom. I'd far
Okay.
prefer call it Circia because it's a cooler
Cercia.
name.
Okay.
But HR
It is a
5440
cooler name.
is referencing Critical Infrastructure Reporting Act, right? And so that's coming out over the next 18 to 24 months. But all right, last article, we're going to talk about Smooth Operator. So this is the Smooth Operator gang. And the reason I bring it up is that we are doing a partnership with our EMEA offices today in this show. And so I'm so excited about it. And so I dug out somebody getting punched in the face in Europe. I just figured it was the only appropriate thing to do. But this talks about Smooth Operator from the 2018 to 2022 attacking a huge swath of banks and being able to steal funds, I think over 11 million, which I guess in the grand scheme of things, I could do more with a pretty concerted business email compromise campaign in about 3
Right.
days than they did over that same time frame, with way less federal involvement from different entities.
Right.
However, that said, this has been the operation. It sounds like they've hit 35 different banks. And I think this is what I wanted to focus on. This, Dom, was not necessarily just that they had hit these banks, but that banks are, nothing has changed, right? When you look back in
Right.
the old robbers, you ask them, why do you rob banks? So that's where the money is, stupid, right? And so you
Right.
have the
Right.
same conversation targeting central banks. But what are your thoughts on what that does to the next few years in this kind of ransomware game, if you will?
Ironically, robbing a bank isn't what it used to be because they don't carry much cash anymore in the digital age. So if you're gonna rob the bank, it's better to do it digitally if you have the guts to try to do that undetected. Um, but yeah, I think banking in particular is one of those industries that has huge amounts of tech debt they have to pay off, and I mean huge. They're probably one of the worst. They're still
Yep.
running
True
on
story.
mainframes often,
Do you find
and
it a little
it's
ironic that they are the worst and the most regulated? I thought compliance solves all security challenges. I thought that was
yeah,
de
totally. That's how it
facto
works,
understood.
right? No, I mean, if you manage
Sorry.
trillions of dollars, right, it's not, you don't just switch the system on a Tuesday, right? So the sheer thought of having computers that can do that math, mainframes are great at that. And that's why they stick with mainframes. They're really damn fast at math. So it's an interesting issue. So I don't think they'll stop, right? And to your point of you
Right.
could accomplish more in a BEC, I don't know that that's the point of these attacks. If you're the smooth operator guy, I think it's more about, can I pwn a bank? It's that sort of hacker mentality, if you will, of can I poke through this and make something happen? And
Yep.
that's probably why they take on banks. Whereas I think these more focused and disciplined organizations just know that they're just going to churn as much cash as they can, and they're doing the BECs and the ransomwares. And but it's interesting. It's a lot of banks for a single gang. I'm just looking at the article. It's a lot of success, right? And a lot of times when you start poking organizations like that, it's not long before 3 letters start finding you.
Yeah. The other side of this that I would take is you have this, and I haven't dug into any of their TTPs, so understand this is straight from the hip, anybody watching this. But the other side that I would take from that is when you get to banks, you understand a lot about companies from banks, right? You understand a lot about how companies function, what their signership is, who their people are, right? So even if they got in, the FinCEN information, I think, would be as valuable as the money that's stolen in this case, right? The amount of data that I could get of busting through a corporate veil, for example, right? I don't have to try to fight through the corporate veil. I just find them on the signer sheet, right? So you kind of get into some of those things that exist. Yeah. And so that's, you could think about it this way. It could be an espionage or nation state type extensibility in that regard, but just completely off the hip, obviously. So
speculation.
That's it's speculation, I suppose, is the correct term for it. Yeah. But I think as we see banks continue to get hit and they already have a healthy regulatory arm, I think it'll drive actually a lot of delta in their world that can be easily applied. It doesn't have to go through some new legislative burden to get to that status, right? So
I think creatively, like smart people work at banks. I know this because I know a few of them, and they're equally mad about.
Does it count if I left the bank? Am I still smart, or is it maybe like transferred upon exit?
You probably left the bank because you're smart.
Oh, thank you, buddy. You're so nice to me. I'll buy lunch.
But there's creative. Like I was just complaining about this on LinkedIn because my bank is like 12-character passwords and SMS at best, right?
Yeah, I saw that post.
And Roddy got on and was like, here's the issue. It's like, yeah, but middleware exists. The concept of APIs exists, right? It can be done. And they don't. So I think even if you can't get rid of those legacy systems, you can absolutely change out front ends and harden down on the back end a little bit.
That is a good call out, though, of the tech debt that exists in banks, in the sense that they do have such archaic applications in a lot of cases, and really it's usually centralized on like 3 or 4 main providers, EFI, those type of players, right? In that regard. So we'll see how that shapes up. But I think as we see this happening, it's that systemic nature that creates that systemic risk in the same way, right, across the board. So be interesting to see how this develops. But let's kick over. We got some brilliant stuff coming from Robin Harris for you today, talking about how you should think around cybersecurity and leveling up.
Do you and your employees know how to tell a difference between a real email and a phishing scam? So as we're coming into the holiday season and we're talking about security awareness, it's important that we level up because we're going to see an increase in the number of scams we're going to get. There's Black Friday, the holiday, social engineering. So the thing is, it's important for people personally, but also as members of your team. So when you train your employees on these skills of being able to spot a phishing scam, this doesn't just help your company. They need to understand this is going to help them keep them safe in their own personal lives, and something that they can also share with their family members, because nobody wants to be the victim of a phishing scam. So there are tools out there that you can leverage that will help you test your people's skills and help them level up and be able to spot those scams and not click. That's what you want to do, not click. And investing in security awareness training so that people have security top of mind. We don't want to just do this in Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We want to keep this going all year long. So a tool that we use to test our employees phishing scam skills is Proofpoint. And it's a tool that we actually offer on our line card, but it's a tool that we use. So that's important. We use it. It's appropriate for smaller companies. It's appropriate for larger companies. And it can grow with you because we started out using the canned tools and now we're making our phishing campaigns more sophisticated, so our employees are growing, and we can make it relevant to our environment. We can make it relevant to the season, and it's almost like employees are like, yeah, I recognize that, and it gives them a sense of awareness of how they're doing and how they're growing in their own security awareness. So you can learn more about it. The link is in the description.
I think that's some sage advice from our friend Robin there.
Very sage advice.
She calls out this point of, we always think about Cybersecurity Month and there's some focus and a lot of news and a lot of things you're going to see, but then it kind of, what about the rest of the year? And at some point I'd love to not have a Cybersecurity Month. I'd like to have a Cybersecurity year per annum, and we continue doing that, right? To her point. So, but
our phishing campaigns internally are getting a bit better because they were absolutely, classic script kiddie examples, but they've been getting better. I've looked twice at a couple of them recently, so props to
I've
them.
had a couple of them centric around some of our sharing tools, right? And you're like, oh, wait a minute, did I get that? No, I did not. That's not. Wait a minute.
You gotta ask Ryan Cromer. We'll have to get him on here to share the phishing story.
Okay.
They impersonated Brad, and they made it look like a Teams alert, and it was quite successful. It was really good.
The other thing I'll call out real quick, and then we'll jump over to Thomas Welton, but is that's Control 14, right? Talking about security awareness training and training your employees is Control 14. And I think she called out something that I love, and I want to call it out here real quick. There's a concept of social proof. It's a British woman that took a concept from the 80s and applied it to cybersecurity and said, if we train our employees and we do the phishing tests and they fail and we beat them up over it, we're calling out the failures, we're calling out the clickers, we're doing it wrong. And the reason is social proof takes this concept that says, if you take someone that speaks the language of a local area or community, but they've never been exposed to their culture and place them inside that culture, and everyone else is doing things one way, pretty quickly they do things that same way. It's the concept of we want to be like the others around us. It's kind of a herd mentality. But as you look at it, it means that if we focused on saying you did well at your training, you recognize that, Dom, you did look twice, but you suggested that it was bad. We've proven it was bad. Great. Good for you. If you focused on that 80% that got it right, we'd be more successful in how we apply cybersecurity training than if we focused on the negative, the ones that failed. And it makes the negative go, I want to be like Dom. Dom's cool. He gets called out in the middle of company meetings for being awesome. I want to be in that situation. And so that's one tidbit I'd add in before we bring Thomas in. But Thomas.
FOMO effect is what I would call that.
Yes, the FOMO effect. I love it. We're going to reclassify social proof as the FOMO effect per Dom. I'm in. I'll start pushing it on socials. Man, Thomas, welcome to the party, brother. Introduce yourself and kind of tell us a little bit about your journey at Pax8.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for having me on today, guys. Tom Welton here, manager of the solution engineering on the EMEA side of things for us here at Pax8. We do a lot of fun facts and we introduce ourselves here. My fun fact is I've now spent more time working for Pax8 outside of the United States than I have inside of the United States. And so about 2 years back in the Colorado branch, 2 years and a few months here going on it every day forward. Out here in Bristol, England is where I get to join you guys today from our wonderful new offices as well. So yeah, appreciate you having me on today.
Yeah, those offices are definitely taking Dom's FOMO effect
Super
for
jealous.
me. So social proof says I need a better office.
Right.
Well, I think that it definitely helped when we started in lockdown out here. So it was very easy to incentivize folks to come into the office. Everybody was trying to escape their families or significant others or roommates just to get a little bit of a break. So yeah, believe it or not, we had to go on a rota or a rotation to get people in and out of the office just because, yeah, we've been consistently running out of space. But it finally moved into some place here, plenty of elbow room. And yeah, very, very excited to be cresting about 240, 250 employees across the European region today. So yeah, had done a bit of growth over the past 2 years.
Yeah. I'm actually super happy to meet you because I didn't realize you speak as fast as I do. And that just makes my heart go all pitter patter, if I'm honest. Claire knows. It makes me very happy when people talk very quickly. That's awesome, man. So you've been out there and you're managing kind of the sales engineering process, and you'd already kind of been that
Mhm.
gentleman here before with some really awesome people in Pax8. But tell me what that kind of journey's been like for you as you've been over there. What's that been? I mean, you've been building up a team. Tell me on some of that journey, and what are some of your successes, and what are some of the failures? I'd love to hear both sides of that coin if we can.
No, that's great. Yeah, and absolutely just that. Really helping out the account management team, kind of that, yeah, sales enablement really on both sides of the equation, whether it's pre-sales, showing off demonstrations, or doing that post-sale kind of, hey, I've got this cool new technology, help me plug it in, let's configure it, let's get some best practices going on so it works all right. And yeah, in kind of the past 2 years, you come out here, there goes from single digits up to, yeah, 250 or so people. You wear a lot of hats in those first couple of months. You yourself represent many departments as an individual.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's what I struggled with, was when we finally had people coming in and these departments now exist, people taking things off my plate. I was like, no, this is mine. These are my duties, my
Right.
responsibilities. But yeah, very, very happy to now bring on a lot of local talent and things like that here, not just in Bristol, have a very sizable office in Zwolle and the Netherlands, working on expanding our Germany office out there in Frankfurt, have partnered with the company out very far to the east of Europe out there, and yeah, TVG in the Baltics. And so Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. There's about 8 brick and mortars today in Europe in which a Pax8 employee can actually report to the office,
That's
which I thought was a
crazy.
pretty cool number the other day we looked up.
So is that a
But
success
yeah,
or a failure in that journey?
a success. Yeah, I would consider that a huge success. Europe, and I mean, yeah, open up Google Maps or something like that. Look how maybe not as big compared to the United States is. I'm a Kansas guy. I'm used to a 9-hour drive home
Yeah.
from Denver to Kansas for something like
And,
Thanksgiving.
and you were
Uh,
there during Brexit, correct? So did that affect any of that kind of brick and mortar conversation and challenges as that played out, or has that been pretty uneventful for you in your world?
It was kind of uneventful for us to, as a business, as an organization, but fascinating from a cultural perspective, because you sit in there and you wake up and you read stories about their lorries and their trucks just trying to get in and out of England to go to the greater Europe, and they're miles and miles long. So there's certain, goods and dairy products and things like that, fish
Oh man.
shelf life that either expiring or not expiring based on these miles and miles of trucks, just because yeah, the diplomacy of it all got a little bit more rigid, not as easy to kind of get in and out with the greater
Sure.
European Union with their passports and stuff. So, yeah, but as far as impacting the business, it was more so their kind of levels of lockdowns, very analog to the US, a little bit different. They call them tiers. They had tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 for the
Right.
lockdown. And so it was really doing a lot of this, actually, a lot of just kind of virtual working and things like that, working with colleagues 6 months over the virtual chat before finally being able to, crack out of that and get into an office, which has been very nice to, yeah, come into a brick and mortar, actually. It's been nice to return to the office.
Yeah, 100%. But one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that I wanted to talk to you about through your experiences, and you have the benefit of having been here as well as there in these markets,
Mm-hmm.
right, from almost an equidistant amount of time. But in the US, we are extremely MSP centric, at least in this core definition of kind of we do it all if we're involved. The VAR centrism isn't near as large as the MSP kind of in the channel, especially serving the SMB, that small and mid-sized business to small enterprise. So I'm wondering, Australia was the same way. Canada's a little bit different. They were very VAR centric and are shifting and moving more and more and more to MSP from the definition we would have here in the States. What are you seeing in UK and in EMEA in general, or maybe take them as separate conversations? But what do you see in the market? Are you working with people that are all in MSPs? Or are you working with people that are VAR and just kind of selling a product or two? What are you seeing?
I mean, we're seeing a lot of what we saw in the U.S. with very MSP centric is probably the first thing that I could say. Most dominantly here in the U.K. and Ireland, keeping them in mind as kind of our region here is one of the subsets that we've broken Europe into. very much a lot of that traditional channel and things like that, of that kind of vendor on top. You've got the indirect reseller, the distributor there, and then that MSP is going to fully service their end customers and things like that. Where we're starting to see shifting into a little bit of the future here, and it's more so in these developed channels that now that they've done everything for a while, they're starting to realize, well, I'm maybe not that great at support, or I'm not that great at project work. So we're seeing a lot of specialization. So one of the new terms I've learned out here is the MSSP, the Managed Security Solution Provider. And that's kind of, the old theory of, double down on what you're good at, and kind of put away the bad. And so that's where we're having a lot of conversations with some of those MSSPs, I guess there. Yeah, I see a little bit of a chuckle there. So yeah, but maybe your thoughts on the
you
MSSP.
pull a trigger. So I feel like, you Dom or me, I don't care which, but
So if we look at CIRCIA that we were just alluding to, it defines MSP, and it's landmark because it defines MSP. So it's really the first time the federal government officially acknowledged we existed. Great. You know what it doesn't define? MSSP, right? Because there's no concept of I handle the data, not the security, or I handle the security, not the data. It doesn't exist. But it almost seems like, because we went through this phase here in the U.S., we had MSSPs for a while. And we're starting to see that convergence back down as we realize that MSSP is a joke, right? And I'm just being totally blunt here. Like it's just not. It's not a concept that works especially in the SMB space. There's applicability in enterprise in certain scenarios, but I think in the SMB space, you're either an MSP or you're not, right?
But I think what it's trying to do is it's actually interesting, because I've seen this play out in several different markets now, but it's this escapement of this awareness finally that we're responsible for all of it, right? The reason an MSSP gets named, or MSP that's security focused, the other guy just leaves potholes open? Like what are we talking about here, right? So you have this challenge of MSP to be an MSSP is this realization in the buffer zone of this unwillingness or incapability to grow into the ability to deliver full security services as well as their data touching services, and then exists as this separate market to some extent. What I do think persists and exists is service level partnering and teaming with better providers, like a NovaSoc being your SOCAS, or Pillar being your SOCAS, right? Like totally makes sense. But, I don't think that term is MSSP. And here's where it broke down for me. And I'll get off my stupid soapbox here in a second, bro, I promise. But where it broke down for me is I was an MSP. We had hired an MSSP. This was in 2018 or so, to watch the watchers. We wanted someone to watch our stuff and see if we have compromises and be our guardians, right? And so someone bought an authentication domain similar to our authentication domain that we were using. And they were doing a DNS homophone, right? Attack where they make a site that looks similar. And I wanted to know how many people had been there, because I found out that existed and people had been clicking on it and it had malware. So I reached out to my MSSP and said, A, why did you not catch the malware? That was very obvious. And B, can you tell me who all's been there? Oh, we only have 3 people. Well, I'm sitting in the room with 6. So I know for a fact you're missing data. What are you looking at? Oh, only firewall logs. What about the SIM? Where's the normalization? Where's your data aggregation? How are you not looking at this in one unified plane? Oh, we only do that if you ask us to. And so this challenge comes in that, to Dom's point, you can't touch and manipulate the settings around data and not be responsible for the implications of said security. And so you get into this point where, in the same way, you can't protect what you don't know you have. If it's not classified, if the data doesn't have data classifications or labels or sensitivity capabilities, then what are you protecting? You're just doing services around security as a service. So trigger done, swear to goodness.
But no, I got one more thing, because it also feeds the marketing.
I'm done. I'm done.
It feeds the massive marketing failure of the cyber industry. So there's a certain provider of SOCAS, not someone who's with us, and their website, I don't know if it's still there, but on the front page of their website, it used to say MSP plus their name equals MSSP. And it made me super angry, because it's like, oh, you plug in a few analysts in a SIM and suddenly you're a super operator. And that's just not the case. So it's a really broken term. I think it needs to go away personally. I'm going to get crap for that. I know I am, but it needs to go
Thomas,
away.
you didn't know you walked into this, did you, buddy?
Man, I appreciate the honesty, and that's honestly what the global channel needs. Because I think that the U.S. is probably the most mature of the channel, just the way the technology is rolled out. Yeah, absolutely. So maybe we're going to get there in another 2 years then, as they're experimenting with those right now. One of the larger driving forces of that, though, definitely is some of the maybe regulation that's coming into play, or some of
Yeah.
the accreditation
Let's
and
talk about that.
certification that's coming out there. Perfect. Yeah. So one of the biggest ones that everybody going to know here is that, yeah, that the GDPR and the General Data Protection
Yep.
Regulation, and that is a European Union wide, and even post Brexit. UK is still a part of Europe, by the way. We do run into that every now and then. They're just not a part of the EU. But I can't tell you how many times we hear that, actually. But yeah, I mean, those kind of things are great as a consumer. One of the things that I see outside of my day-to-day job, I log on the internet and every website has the accept or reject cookies or open it up, and it's almost a double
So
or
good.
triple the amount of pop-ups you get in the United States. And I love it because I feel for the first time like I actually have control of my data. So that is something that as a person I've grown, and nobody likes additional pop-ups, but it's reject, reject, reject. And I get to tell it no
Bro,
all
every
the time
time.
on the website. And it is just,
Yeah.
a lot better control than what we have in the United States there. And then more locally here to the United Kingdom, and just having me worked out of Bristol here the last couple of years, is something called Cyber Essentials. And so that's what I'm not sure. Are you guys familiar with the Cyber Essentials kind of framework a little bit? And so that's where, I think we're seeing a
But
huge
elaborate for
set
the
of
audience, right?
examples.
Because
Mhm.
as I understand it, you have your Essential 8, which is the Australian version. They now have this enhanced Essential 8, which is a larger group. Here we have kind of CISA's cybersecurity framework, CSF. And so for yours, it is the Essentials, Cyber Essentials. What's included in that? Do you have any kind of a smattering of things that's in it? But what all's in that?
It's at least about 100 or maybe even a couple hundred kind of questions. You can definitely source this information on the internet, get it on spreadsheets and things like that. It's very interesting. Yeah, with the Essential 8 down in Australia, we've got the Cyber Essentials, and then there's kind of the top tier Cyber Essentials Plus, because everybody's got that Plus model to go to the next level. And that, really goes back to that conversation of what you're talking about, is if you don't know what data you have, how can you be sure that you're protecting it? That really is a thorough exercise in going through that. And so that's where, some of these MSSPs that were coming in, are starting to offer at least services and a little bit of hand holding and coaching, just to get that MSP to recognize, hey, you may manage X thousands of endpoints, but you're not going to be in a good way here if you don't have any idea about some of the data that you're dealing with.
What about
And
the
it looks like it's
teeth
a certified.
of cyber essentials? Because that's a big one. Is a lot of frameworks that are broadly adopted here in the U.S. don't have any teeth because nobody's saying you need to go use a framework, right? It's changing, and I hope it continues to change. But out there, I know cyber essentials is a requirement for certain lines of business or certain maybe government engagements. Where does that start to have teeth?
Well, that's what just that is, the kind of whispers and various levels of maybe government positioned, or honestly, it's a lot of risk. And then insurance. A lot of people don't think about insurance in the cybersphere, but in order for you to get a premium rate on your car insurance, you may go to driving school and you may get a lower rate on your car insurance. If you can get these Cyber Essentials and the Cyber Essentials Plus, you can insure your business against cyber attack at much better commercials for that. So we're at least seeing it snowball. We are seeing a lot of growth in it rather than any other models. And I like that terminology a lot. It does
We're
have
trying to
teeth,
pull
is
off
something I
here.
definitely confirm. Yep.
With insurance is saying, please pick a framework someday.
Yeah. I actually wasn't aware of this, and I feel a little ignorant, and now I'm gonna have to go dig in a bit more. But I knew about Cyber Essentials. What I didn't know is that it was a IASME certified program where you actually could get certified to say, yes, we're good. Danielle, do you mind if I share my screen real quick? I'm going to pop over to that and good to go. Yeah. So this is actually the site. One of the things I want to point out, to actually Thomas's points, was in the US, you don't typically see a button for rejecting optional cookies here. You typically see just manage cookies to choose the alternate.
Oh, it's like
versus
4
accept
clicks
all.
to get rid of those cookies. Yeah.
Yeah. Here it's one. So that's the first piece. And then the second piece is, what is Cyber Essentials? It's an effective government-backed scheme, which I do love that they use scheme. The colloquialism here, scheme would be a bad thing, right? Like it would be something like Wile E. Coyote
Like a
scheming
Ponzi
on the
scheme. Yeah.
yeah. It's not usually great in U.S. translation, but it's an effective government-backed scheme that will help you protect your organization, whatever its size, against a whole range of the most common cyber attacks. So it's the same thing you're seeing in UK as U.S. But what's different is you have a certificate search where you can check your company to see if they are actually certified, and you can go get certified from IASME internationally and nationally. And so I wasn't aware that you could do that, but it does appear to be, I'm not certain if it's an audited framework or not. Oh, verified self-assessment, and then the plus is assessed. Very good. So you have this kind of self-assessed option, or I've been audited and validated kind of play. I think that's great. I now, unfortunately, Thomas, hate you because I know what I'm doing this weekend is reading through this. So God bless us. But yeah, no, very cool. That's very awesome. Thanks for that call out. I was not aware of that being an auditable framework.
And that's where we're seeing at least some of those partnerships between the MSPs. And yeah, I don't want to throw the extra S in there and trigger again.
No, you're good.
But at least those are the kind of mentalities. Is they'll go through that self-assessment exercise and say, hey, I'm okay, but I really have no idea what I'm doing for about a third of this. And I don't want to call it a checklist because that kind of relegates it to being lower than it really is. And it's this third of a thing is a huge attack surface for you. This is a big blind spot for your business. And again, it just takes one or done with cybersecurity. I don't have to tell you guys that it's over for them as a business and all of their customers as well.
In a lot of cases, one of the interesting things about self-assessment and talking about these things and having MSSPs form as an output is that in most of that development here in the US, they still really sucked at having policies and procedures and guidance for those things. And so it's kind of this point where you see them flexing I'm going to go throw the basketball at the hoop before they start realizing they can't stay more than 3 seconds in the lane. They have to be outside the 3-point line to make 3 points. They have to, like, you see this kind of like buying the tool. They buy the basketball, but they haven't written the rules of the game. They haven't written the processes. They haven't written the things that are necessary to actually develop security. So where I see that core breakdown in being MSP, MSSP, or even this journey is that the journey always comes back to someone has to own the process. Someone has to own the documentation. Someone has to be able to prove they did what they said they were going to do. Somebody has to gather the artifacts. Someone has to be able to meet those GRC type things. And when you start getting down to that, you can't do that in a separate world like that. You can't do it in a vacuum. You'd have to develop partnerships with someone if you were going to keep that separate, like an MSSP where you had these anchoring points of what they did and what you did. But I think ultimately, until you start seeing policy be part of the conversation, they're still not delivering security. And I think that's one of the things where I'll maybe make some people angry out there right now. But it's kind of that maturity point.
I'm going to make them angry for a little bit because it's pre-recorded. So,
That's true. I get like a week before some people threaten to save my. Never mind. That's already going to be done. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Anyways. So as you've grown that market out there, are you seeing MSP's maturity level around your products? You guys don't just handle security products, right? You handle the demonstrations and integrations for 30 products. But what's the maturity level of the MSPs? What have you seen over the last couple of years in your time there?
They're good, but not great. So it's a fantastic for us as an American company to really provide value out here because we're not the first distributor. We're not the first ones that know about security out here. But there's kind of this bar and this kind of par for the course that existed when we landed, and we get to take a lot of what we learned in the U.S. out here. And then implement it. And it doesn't always work. You asked me to mention some of the failures and things like that. Some of our household names on our line card, people aren't interested in out here. They don't care as much because it's maybe a little bit of a US centric vendor. And I can't tell you how big of a deal data centers are. If I can say anything about how maybe shocked we were about this was why isn't something doing so well? Well, yeah, I'll buy it as soon as we get a data center out here, as soon as you can store my
data why?
And tell me. Well,
any
some
guesses
of it's
as to why?
Some of it's personal preference.
Data sovereignty.
Honestly, some of it's Brexit, though. I mean, we have, there's data sovereignty within it, but now, honestly, politics comes into data storage every now and then where, there are certain folks on either side of the channel here that may not want to store their data in a certain region of the world, even though it is within Europe still.
Yeah.
And so, those are some lessons learned. And we do have some
all right, vendors
that we've
any of our vendors listening here, if you're going to go do business in EMEA, you have to have data centers with centricity to EMEA and the proportions that you serve in each different various organization and region. If you need it, I'll give you Thomas's cell phone number. You can reach out. He'll help you out on what you need. So, but I love that you're calling out the failures. And I think that's a great one of knowing the market, but also knowing the regulatory landscape that's shifting and the political, to some extent, landscape that shifts over time too. So That's a great call out. What else you got? What other things have you seen? I mean, we talked about some of the maturity, and you were starting down that road.
Well, that's where kind of as you maybe expand a little bit outside of the UK, we do have some other very developed markets. I think in Netherlands, Germany, France, places like that, where we're starting to establish and get teams and departments out there going. And then, yeah, EMEA stands for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. There are markets out there that are really still, and I don't mean to put this in a negative spin, but still very stuck in the hardware days. That's a little bit kind of shocking to me when I speak to an MSP on the phone and all they're asking me about is the past. They're asking me about stuff that was solved 10 years ago from my perspective. And
does this work with tape drives?
Yeah. Certain backups. Solving some of those legacy things and like that. And yeah, we went to a trade show. Yeah, that was very hardware focused. We were the only cloud person in there. And it was very interesting to hear them kind of telling stories about people that were, hoarding CDs back in the day because they were sure CDs were going to make it through this transition. And then all of a sudden you're left with the digital age. And I feel like we're maybe seeing that again now with people hoarding servers and big server racks and things like that, as opposed to maybe transitioning to some kind of cloud infrastructure. And we're seeing it on a wider scale on some of the countries. And so in a really cool way, that US market gets to be very developed. Pax8, we get to make an impact. We don't just get to observe the channel out here. We're actively elevating that bar and saying, hey, there's a better way of doing it. And yeah, it's just been a lot of fun for the past 2 years out here to be able to be a part of that.
Definitely a different market. Like if you focus on the EMEA part of EMEA and look at just cloud in general in the Middle East and in Africa, it's almost up until recently it was almost non-existent. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Microsoft just opened its second region in UAE, but they both came out this year, right? So it was this year when they got public cloud, and the understanding in the past was if you're going to use Microsoft services in the UAE, they're not going to be in the UAE, which was obviously a problem in the UAE where the government is very strict over data and controls and privacy. Maybe not for the same reasons as the EU, but that's irrelevant. But, they're just now starting to get these resources made available to them. So I think now they're at the beginning of their adoption phase. This is the US. Azure came out, or they started tinkering with Azure, Microsoft did, right around the time Windows Vista came out, right? So we've had the concept of cloud for that long. And then obviously web services followed, Amazon Web Services followed. And now you've got this world where we've been in it for a long time. And imagine being in the UAE, they just got it, right? So the adoption curve has just started in that region of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And just getting exposure to these new technologies. That's, again, why my team has been very busy is teaching them to use this brand new technology, or saying, oh, there's, and I don't know how you guys feel about the term single pane of glass, but I find it a little bit too utopian that, it's a nice thing on paper, but I don't think we can ever quite get
We're
to
on the same page.
Okay, good. But there are some things out there that are kind of, a little bit of a super product. And so some things with a lot of moving pieces, and they may just be leveraging a small subset of it. Me and the team that I have here, very educational on a day-to-day basis of, hey, we're already buying this thing here. Look at what else it can do, and look at all these kind of additional things that it's able to grow into. And the infrastructure is just absolutely exploding. We've got, whatever bar charts and graphs of where it's going to be in, 2026 and 2028. And it's just astonishing to see the growth that hasn't even happened yet as far as the infrastructure market.
I love the call out you've made about how the most exciting part has been being able to be that educator and be that, leading the voice and changing and explaining the market and what's succeeded and failed other places. One of the coolest things about being human is that we have the ability to transfer knowledge to our young, to our friends, to other people, right? I don't have to relearn how to make a candle. We've had that figured out for a while. And so you have that kind of capability. And so I love when someone leans into, my job is to go help people not have the same headaches, to educate where the better way is, to your point. And I bet you feel like a kid in a candy store right now, just being able to take very smart MSPs and very smart people and expose them to concepts and methodologies that they haven't seen, or that they haven't thought about, or they haven't had the use case and understanding. And so I think that's what a really cool spot. I've got to take a minute and put in my application to transfer to the UK for a couple months, but especially with that swag new office you guys have there. But we've heard a lot about
that office.
I am too. We've heard a lot about the MSP's growth and the regulatory kind of growth there in the same way. Are you seeing in your mind, because you were here in the US as we kind of went through that same transformance, right? 4 years ago, are you seeing a similar scale of how quickly the MSPs are leaning into these insurance regulations, making changes, dumping whole new products, going to whole new products? Like, are you seeing a speed of play delineation play out in the UK and in the EMEA in general?
Yeah, I think so, and especially here in the UK, you have to move fast. It is a much more developed market, I would say, yeah, than a lot of the EMEA, and so there's healthy competition out here. Pax8 is not the only distributor out here, and if we are not moving fast enough for some of our clients, then yeah, there are others out here that are doing some great things as well, and so that bar is rising at the distributor level, and the MSPs are responding accordingly with it. We are seeing a little bit more of that specialization, I would say, that, specific industry that they're targeting, just because there are certain verticals out here that are just astonishingly massive. Healthcare being one of them, the NHS, the National Health Systems of the United Kingdom being one of those. Again,
Yeah, they've had
it's
some
a
issues.
government health system.
Sure.
Yes, they have.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't want to necessarily throw them just putting goosebumps in this in the future there, but that's, you guys were talking about high profile, earlier in the show there, listening in. Yeah, I have those high profile clients that have issues go wrong. Those are the conversations that resonate with our customers, or our MSPs that then resonate with the customers. Hey, if the NHS is managing data in this way and it didn't necessarily work out in their favor because they weren't using the right technology, I'm going to be delicate about saying that. But yeah, this is absolutely something then you have to be worried about. And you don't want to ever have these conversations based off fear. I never have to tell you guys that. That's what, we don't ever preach on the fear, but the reality is that there's the cyber attacks, there's the maliciousness, there's the red team that's out there against us, but then there's our own ignorance and there's our own unknowing about the data. There's me with my cup of coffee in the morning spilling it on my laptop. I'm as much of a risk to my laptop as anybody out there with a keyboard and a couple of scripts against me, kind of thing. And so it's really convincing people that we're seeing wider adoptions of that. One of the things I think is really great about go for it.
Well, one of the things that you talk about is the fear, and people always talk about fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or FUD, or fear, or whatever is leading by that. But I don't have to be afraid of a car coming from behind me to want Dom to tell me I need to move, right? Like, so there's still a value in knowing the data. I don't want to get hit by
FUD
the car.
was a super valid thing to demonize in, I don't know, let's say 2010 to 2015, maybe. When cyber incidents really just absolutely exploded out of nowhere. Like, we had the occasional cyber incident,
18 and 19,
and then ransomware. And then ransomware came on set, and that changed the game. It's not FUD, it's just truth. Like, the truth is you are going to have an incident, and the truth is we have to work together to reduce what's going to happen when you do indeed have an incident. And I think that's the difference. Is there's I talk to a lot of partners who are like, that's FUD and whatever, but it's not. Like, we can be telling the pure truth, and it sounds like
empirical data.
FUD,
yes.
But we're speaking of what we've already seen and what we know we are going to see. The FUD factor for me was when we would talk about these ridiculous out of band attacks that are they're not going to happen against the average. The whole story about the drones on the roof, which was a recent one, that's not. That was really cool. To Tim's Kitten Shop. It's a cool attack. I gotta find the article. I'll put it in the
comments. That I tested. My drone will not carry my Wi-Fi pineapple, just allegedly.
No, these were nice drones, and they modified them. They stuck Wi-Fi pineapples on them and landed them in the roof network. Yeah. So I'll share the article in the comments. If you're a nerd, you should read it. But anyways, that attack is not happening against Tim's Kitten Shop. So if you're the partner that's going out and saying that, then in my opinion, that's FUD. But if you're going to tell someone that they are going to get attacked, you're just telling the truth, right?
Yeah. Yeah. True story. All right. Once again, we've cut you off, Thomas. You remember where you were? Because I'll get your chain pulled again if you need to.
No. What I maybe wanted to comment on, which we've seen fantastically here in the United Kingdom and then very established in the Netherlands as well as our first kind of couple of beachheads, the MSP communities. And so them getting together as groups, potential competitors from maybe the East Coast or the West Coast or the North or South. I know for sure that there's one of them. And I think they started out in Australia. Tech Tribe is definitely a big component.
Yeah, my buddy Nigel Moore down there.
Yeah, they're great.
Having great conversations with them. There's one here in the UK called Network Group that, very, very dialed in with, fantastic group of MSPs, and we get together and that's what levels up the channel. That's what gets us to that next spot, 100%. Sitting there having that healthy conversation. And honestly, where we want to be as Pax8 to kind of plug what we're able to do is let's put them all in a room together and then start that conversation and just kind of walk away or become a fly on the wall, because that's how I learn about what's going on. That's how I learn about the next
Love
couple of conversations of where they're going, is just sitting there hearing 5 different MSPs from 5 different verticals talk about maybe nothing to do with the cloud, but just how they're running their business, how they're convincing people to come into the office, how they're managing the people that are working remote that they hired over COVID, but now they have their business open. So how do I deal with that? And yeah, those kind of lessons learned from the community are very, very strong. Another one that I would like to call out, or at least, one more is the CompTIA, just because I had always thought CompTIA was a certification. They're a massive network, and they've been putting on some really great trade shows here in the United Kingdom. They're also, again, just bringing that community together for that conversation that, we're very, very happy to be a part of.
You're 100% right. I mean, I think the call out to the community and the shared and collaborative nature and kind of that wanting to help others and understand that we've been through this, that grew more for me than anything else. I mean, in the sense that, you kind of camaraderise and you wind up doing similar things, which is really helpful if you think of what the next phase has to be for technology service providers. And in general is regulation, some degree of licensure, some degree of actually having certification and proof that I should be doing that. Like, you can't turn a wrench on a plumbing pipe without 4 years of apprenticeship. You can't cut my beard without 6 months and a visit to the Board of Cosmetology in the United States. Like, there's genuinely these restrictions to things that can't destroy your world, but technology people can destroy your world and have zero regulation to be them. And so as you see that happening, what's cool about communities hive minding and sharing what works is if you go to almost every doctor's office, it doesn't matter what state in the United States, it doesn't matter where you are, there's going to be a reception area, you're going to check in, you're going to go back and meet the doctor, you're going to leave, and they're going to set you up for your next appointments, or they're going to charge you if they need to, and then you're going to walk out. That's the same everywhere. And that's because these industries have made this understanding of what works. They've matured. What's great about the technology service industry doing this is we're starting to create our own critical mass of people that do it somewhat similarly. What's great about that is once that block of clay comes together, you can start shaping them to all do it somewhat similarly well, right? And so you start getting into that kind of concept of why this is so important. I genuinely believe that the voice-to-voice, the peer-to-peer, B2B kind of education that happens in this world is probably the only reason we will make it in the next decade where we need to be from a cybersecurity perspective in all of our markets.
1,000%. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think just maybe even adding on to that, it helps to recognize sometimes when you are in your own echo chamber. That doesn't do anybody any good if you're just sitting there in a room full of people that you agree with and agree with you. And so that's what, a lot of the value I get is when I go to these trade shows and these big conventions in London is I go see vendors that aren't on our line card, maybe not yet, maybe never. But I go down and I sit through their 30-minute zero trust presentation, and I learn something. I learn about what's important with them, how they're designing that product.
Me too.
And that's one of those big things that I just love doing. So
That's fantastic. It's that willingness to learn, right? I used to change careers every 3 or 4 years. I've been in diamonds. I've been in numismatic and non-numismatic gold purchasing. I've been a banker. I've been an investment advisor. And I would just get bored. One thing about technology in general is you can never, ever run out of material to learn. You can never, ever reach the edge or boundary of some degree of understanding around cyber. It's changing every day. Dom and I make this joke when we get on stage, right? Like by the time I walked up these stairs, there's probably a new threat vector. There's probably a new attack. There's, something to that effect. But that's a good thing. I mean, it really is one of those things where you can, learn constantly. And if you can do that and disseminate what matters out of that, then you can be very successful in that SE kind of role, right? It's about knowing what they don't know. The teacher's dilemma is often that you assume people understand a core concept. So as you continue to teach, you make the wrong assumption that they could even possibly understand the concept you're teaching at this point, right? That's this kind of challenge. And so I find that I struggle a lot with teacher's dilemma. But when you're running an SE team, how do you combat that kind of challenge? How do you meet the people where they are during kind of those presentations like that?
You really, and I love that. I'm going to have you come out and deliver that to my new hire class, actually. So
The freebie is recorded. We're good.
Great. Yeah, that's a great one. but really it's agnosticism. It's staying neutral in it. And yes, we've got 30 things on our line card that we deliver. And that's the benefit and why I love my job, and what I preach to my team as well is that, hey, we're not sitting here listening for a certain product or a certain buzzword. We're asking you for your business problem. What does this resolve? What are your pain points? We make them squirm. We don't make it easy for them. We kind of dig into that. Tell me more. I need you to admit to me out loud exactly why you're not doing this today, or exactly why this is not working. And really digging into that. And that's where we're finding a lot of success. And ultimately, that trust with our partnerships have just skyrocketed. I think we have really great relationships now with a lot of really great MSPs because we don't push certain things to one degree or another. We sit down and recently kind of launching this newer department. As we get bigger and bigger, the solution consultants are now sitting down and only 30 vendors. I say that because it's as small as it'll ever be. They're having that holistic approach and just sitting down on a 2-hour phone call and saying, hey, what are you backing up your mailboxes with? Okay, great. What are you doing for your mobile device management? Okay, great. What's your strategy for either that EDR, or is that optional? Is that something they go for? And we're not sitting there negotiating on price. We're not sitting there talking about any particular vendors, because ultimately we don't care in a really good way. We're agnostic. We're looking at the best technology to fit their problems, and then kind of working backwards from that. And so that's that's where my passion lies with my team. And I hope I've done a good job of distilling it down to them. There's about 10 of them now across Europe. And then, the trick to maybe layer on top of that I haven't necessarily brought up in the show so far is that everything that you and I have done out here has been in English. So most of the world, doesn't speak English. And so we now hit language barriers, and delivering services in French and German and Portuguese, Spanish, Italian. And all of a sudden, Europe is a big place with a lot of languages and cultures. That'll be the next step. I think that'll be the trick for us to go forward. Is to maintain what we've done in the English market, and then expose kind of non-English speaking markets to these technologies as well.
Yeah, and how do you transfer that message to meet that market that has different cultural adaptations, has different understandings of the words and language? Yeah, that's fantastic.
Just the word
Somebody
scheme,
was calling out,
right? Like imagine if NIST published their new scheme, we'd all be like, nuh-uh, right? These are important nuances when working globally.
Yeah. And I think the challenge you run into is, what does that scale look like too? Typically we're trying to break our scale in the English speaking market into verticalization of their specialty. What do you do? Is it security? Is it, if you're doing that now in multiple languages, the number of humans necessary to maintain that separation of capabilities is much more difficult, right? Because you now have, every language has to have N plus that language, right? And so you have three more people. Just curious how that continues to scale, and how you have to deliver that differently in that grander scheme of, micro markets. I don't mean that negatively, but you just have multiple markets that would not by their own definition reach a certain scale, but separately each have a certain amount of support structure that's still requisite, right? You have to have the language speaking humans, cultural.
They are micro markets. That doesn't mean they're small, but if you look at now, we have some French speaking support folks now, and obviously a French website, and that helps out in Canada, and that helps out in France.
It does.
And then where it kind of stops at some point. Obviously there's other areas that speak French, but my point being is it stops, and then you have to go after the next language, which might be Portuguese, or it might be whatever it is, and then you run out of markets that serve that language, and then so it's a very hard process. We've been having a lot of conversations about this, all the way down to like platforms and tools that we put in front of people. Does it have all the languages? And now you have to talk to vendors. Do you have all these languages if you want to serve these markets? It's a hard challenge.
You'd be proud of me though, Thomas. You'd be proud of me. I'm at a 57-day streak on learning German on my Duolingo. So
I don't want to one up you, but I hit 99 on my Spanish yesterday, so I got mine today. I'm gonna hit 100 today, actually. Yeah, I'll send you a text later when I hit 100. So
we'll have to be friends. I'll keep you honest. You keep me honest. We'll hook up.
I gotta follow you. There's a whole 10 of us out here, that were on that.
Oh, that's epic. Yeah, my wife and I have been doing it. She's at 90 something days, but I'm slower than her. So
very proud of you. Keep the streak alive. Yeah, that's all you got to do. Yeah.
Well, this has been a blast. I would actually love to do a follow-up show with you at some time too. This has been very easy communication, and I'm really excited about what I've learned today. So thank y'all so much. All right, let's go ahead and get us closed out. we're going to go ahead and wrap up. If you haven't, done the button thingies and smashed and done the things, please do that. But join us again next week. We're going to actually do a really cool journey called the identity journey, from passwords to one ring to rule them all, right? And the understanding of this episode is Dom and I are going to take you from, oh my God, my users have passwords they're manually typing in and probably using the same one, to password managers, to an SSO introduction and understanding of business impact analysis, all the way out to an escapement of a single SSO source of truth and single source of a lot of controls you get to meet from that. So join us next week for that. I really appreciate everybody for being here. Thank y'all. See you next time.
Everyone, catch you next time.